Hey guys, what's going on? It's your boy Luke here for our Saturday night football preview. A little bit different. This was supposed to be a two-game slate. Obviously, I'd have quite a bit of madness to this point of the week in the NFL. That's why we haven't seen any main slate content. We've had primetime slates moved, just madness all over. So we're going to be doing this in a live stream format. I wanted to make sure we waited as close as we could until game time, just in case we had any last-second injuries, any people inactive and whatnot. I made content 3 separate times this week for the main slate. Was about to upload it there on Friday the last time. I had those 3 games moved. I threw up my hands. I said, you know what, man? We're not going to have any main slate content this week. We're just going to cover it with live streams because I'm doing all this work, 2-3 hours of production for it to have a game canceled last second and it not matter at all. So we'll do it here in the live stream format. Of course, during the week, we're going to have all of our Patreon projections there. So if you guys want access to all this data as it is changing live, make sure you guys go over there to the Patreon because this week, especially more so than most, there's going to be a whole lot of moving parts. Here for tonight, though, we have an intriguing matchup, one that's a little bit lower scoring on paper. We have a 45-point over-under, relatively close spread with the Colts favored by less than 3 points. I agree with the low total, right? I think 45 points is just about appropriate. I think it could very well go over that total, especially if these teams tend to pass it a little bit more than running, which we'll get to the game script here in a second. I think we might see a little bit more passing than we saw with that Bills-Patriots game for sure. Either way, though, the spread I don't agree with. I think the Patriots should be favorites here, even on the road. They've been a better team to this point of the year, whether it's on offense or defense, in terms of their efficiency. In terms of volume, sure, you have more plays per game over on the Colts side of things. That's why we have more yardage, more points put up, that kind of thing. But they run a lot more plays. If you run it on a per play basis, Patriots edge them in every single category. That's what I use to try and break down teams. A lot of people ask what my process is for doing betting, that kind of thing. I break it down on a per play basis because when you have two teams with conflicting styles that are playing each other, you're not going to get the same type of circumstances that you've been using for your data the rest of the year. In general, let's talk about the game script because this is where I deviate from a lot of the industry. Because Bill Belichick is an absolute mastermind, you have to treat the Patriots way differently than every other team in the NFL. He routinely will take your number one option and make them completely non-existent. For the Colts, there is no question who that is. That is Jonathan Taylor. He is their 1 through 3 option on that team. You're talking 50% plus usage in games where they're ahead. So tonight, I expect Bill Belichick to be stacking that box. 8 or 9 guys in that tackle box area every single play, which is really going to make them try and spread the ball around. You've seen Carson Wentz have some of these games in the past. When Jonathan Taylor was down for a game earlier on in the year, he threw for more than 400 yards. So we know that this is completely in the fold. This Indianapolis offense is capable of throwing the ball downfield. They would just rather not if they don't have to. In this game, they're going to be forced into a lot of those circumstances. So Carson Wentz, even though I don't typically love him on pretty much any slate, let alone a showdown slate, I think he's one of my favorite plays tonight. I just expect them to have to pass the ball 20, maybe even 30% more than they have to in the past. Doesn't mean I hate Jonathan Taylor. You guys can see I still have him projected really nicely here. It's definitely really expensive at $12,800, but a lot of this passing offense for Indy, which is no doubt going to be slept on tonight, are guys that will definitely be in my pool. Let's talk about a few specifics for the Indianapolis offense that I like, and then we'll move over to the Patriots, which if I think they're going to win tonight, obviously I expect a lot of fantasy production to come from that side as well. First and foremost, the Indy side's a lot more expensive. So people like Michael Pittman Jr. at $10,400 are a sizable amount more expensive than their counterparts on the Patriots. T.Y. Hilton comes in at a nice price at $5,800. I would say he's my favorite receiving option for that team. He's the number 2 wide receiver over there. Sometimes he's been the number 1, particularly when they're playing from behind. We've seen T.Y. Hilton get a lot more of those possession-type catches, whereas Michael Pittman Jr. is the clear red zone target, somebody who has a much larger frame than a T.Y. Hilton. So sometimes he gets looks on third down rather than Hilton, which that's going to make a lot of sense. When you have a guy that can box out defenders, he's going to be extremely useful on a third down type of circumstance. But in terms of taking the top off of the defense, Hilton is clearly your guy. He's a lot faster than a Michael Pittman Jr. He's also a lot better of a route runner. So at $5,800, I think he gives you right around a similar type projection. You can see 2.3 points separating the two there. And in terms of points per dollar, not really close. Hilton's a much better play there. He's going to make a lot more of my lineups as well, just because at $5,800, you get a lot more flexibility. Zach Pascal's also an intriguing option for taking the top off of defense, even more so than T.Y. Hilton. He's got a lot more speed. Isn't as good of a route runner, right? So he has a much lower floor, isn't going to see a lot of PPR upside. He could still take the top off with one of those 80-yard touchdowns, and that would be more than enough at $5,400. So you can see I like both of them. Both will be in my player pool. I just think that T.Y. Hilton has a little bit of a higher floor with a similar ceiling to a type of Zach Pascal. Let's go over to the Patriots side of things. Jonathan Taylor, I don't even want to give any airtime to. You guys know to go ahead and play him. He's the best running back in the NFL, especially in terms of fantasy production. I just think it's interesting to look at some of these wide receivers, right? Because they're a lot less expensive. Jonathan Taylor at $12,800, that is extremely prohibitive. I just don't think they're getting enough attention as they should. In terms of the Patriots, because I expect them to have a lot of success tonight, it's going to be a relatively balanced attack. You always get that from Bill Belichick. There's never going to be a game where they're running the ball 80% of the time or passing the ball 80% of the time unless there's 60, 70 mile an hour winds. That was a huge outlier because it was on a primetime slate. I'm talking about that Monday Night Football against the Buffalo Bills. People expect this team to just run the ball 80% of the time every week. That has not been their blueprint. In fact, they've passed the ball more than they've ran it this year. Particularly if you look at their first 5 or 6 games, this team is passing the ball 56% of the time. I expect them to get back to that type of mold tonight, particularly in a game that they absolutely need to win. And this game against the Colts, even though it's not a big head-to-head matchup, they're in different tiers in terms of their quality of team on each side here. The Patriots need to win this game to win that division. If they lose here, next week's game against the Buffalo Bills becomes a must-win. They would absolutely have to win that game to take down the division. And Bill Belichick has his sights not only on that AFC East, but at the number 1 seed as well. Don't get him wrong. He truly believes that they're the best team in the league. I'm one of the few people that thinks that they're a top 2, top 3 team in the league as well. So I do expect them to have a lot of success tonight without Damian Harris. Their number 1 running back is going to be Ramondre Stevenson. You're going to see 17 to 25 touches for him. He's a great play. You can use him at captain. You can use him at flex. He's a borderline lock option for me tonight. If they're going to go to anyone else other than Stevenson, they've loved favoring somebody like a Brandon Bolden. He's questionable himself, so we're going to need to make sure he's active for tonight. But he has practiced. He has been in the walkthroughs, that kind of thing. So we do expect him to be able to suit it up tonight. But if he ends up being a surprise scratch, that would just give a little bit more usage to Stevenson, making him an even more solid play. The beauty of Mac Jones is because he's a little bit more expensive than he should, he's also going to be a little bit overlooked. While I do think that he might lack the kind of top-end upside we're looking for, again, this should be a relatively balanced approach. Whereas the Colts, especially if they're playing from behind, could go completely pass heavy. They could completely abandon the run. That would not surprise me at all. Patriots, though, they're not going to go one way or the other. So Mac Jones, he's not going to be getting you 4 touchdowns, 400 yards, that kind of thing tonight. Whereas Carson Wentz could very well go out and do that. So don't love him enough to put him in the captain slot, but you're not going to get any arguments for me playing Mac Jones tonight. In terms of the wide receiver options, you have a very unpredictable offense. So they're coming in with lower prices. A lot of that comes due to their instability, especially in terms of their floor projection. And Kendrick Bourne is the number 1 example of that. He's had a few good games of late, particularly 2-3 games ago, where he put up over 15 fantasy points in both of those affairs. Unfortunately, though, you saw the floor last time out. 0 catches, 0 targets. Again, that was a huge outlier, particularly with that type of weather. But at the same time, Kendrick Bourne at $8,800 is very much so overpriced. He's going to be in my player pool just because he has some top-end upside. Much like a Zach Pascal, he's really fast. He's capable of making people miss in the open field. So he at least has that big play upside. But he's also $8,800 as compared to $5,400. So still in my player pool. Again, he's the quote-unquote number 2 wide receiver for that Patriots team. But there's been times this year where he's actually played the number 3 or even number 4 wide receiver role. The one guy for the Patriots we know is going to see a ton of targets, a ton of snap share out there. He's the true number 1 wide receiver for this team. That is Jacoby Myers. He's $7,400, so he's underpriced. He should probably be closer to where we have Kendrick Bourne on this list. So I do really like him here. He has a much higher floor than a Kendrick Bourne because he's going to play pretty much all the snaps. He gives us a huge role in that offense. He's not going to be taken off for any type of sub packages or anything like that. The only reason he's not a household name when it comes to the NFL or DFS for that matter is the touchdown production. The guy's been a little bit unlucky. It's been well documented, especially among a lot of people in the industry, that he deserves to score a lot more touchdowns, and they're going to be coming eventually. A lot of that's just due to variance, and I do expect him to rebound at least at some point, if not this year. Let's move down to the tight ends. These lower end wide receivers, you can mix them in as flyers and pure GBP builds. But in terms of core plays, none of them are making my core. At tight end, though, plenty of core plays to speak of. Tight ends are usually favorably priced when it comes to showdown slates. They also come in much lower owned than they should. And every single week we see a tight end score. So Hunter Henry, he's a prime candidate to be that guy tonight. He's much less expensive than he should be. Slates in the past, like against that Bills team, he was in that mid 7K range. So $6,400, even as the highest expensive player at this position, is well warranted. Jack Doyle, he's been playing a lot more snaps for this Indianapolis Colts team. At the beginning of the year, it was really the Mo Alley Cox show. But as they become a more and more running team, they went over to Jack Doyle. Now, here's the caveat. Tonight, I think there's a good chance they go to a pass-heavy approach because of that emphasis Bill Belichick's going to put on that running game. If that's the case, Mo Alley Cox at $1,000 is extremely intriguing. He can get plenty of red zone usage. And if they're playing from behind, there is no doubt that he's going to see a lot more snaps than the Jack Doyle. So between the two, I would definitely prefer Mo Alley Cox. But if they end up being in a positive game script, if the Colts get out to a good start, there's no doubt that Jack Doyle has been seeing a lot of snaps. Jonnu Smith's a good flyer play. We saw him have a very good game last time out. That's really his only good performance of this year, though. So I think he's going to be a little bit more popular than he should be because of the type of games that he's had over this last 2-3 weeks. But again, that's only happened of late. If you take a look at his entire workload over this year, it has not been the best. He'll be in my player pool, but I like some of these other tight end options just a little bit more. Defenses, absolutely love them on this slate. Anytime you get a lower total game at 45 points right there, you're going to like the defenses. I like the Patriots side a little bit more because I do expect them to win. The kickers, not loving the kickers. I'm going to be honest with you. Nick Folk, first of all, is questionable, so he might not even be the kicker for the Patriots tonight. And Michael Badgley has been an absolute mess. The guy's missed a lot of field goals in prime time. A few weeks ago, the guy missed like a 30-yarder, that kind of thing, missed an extra point. It's not like he can't figure it out. It's not like he can go out there, get you 10, 15 points, that kind of thing. But he'd be a little bit more attractive if we had a 55, 60 point total, that kind of thing. That's all we've got here. We have a question down here in chat. Thoughts on fading both QBs? I would not do it. That's pretty much a rule for every single showdown slate out there. That raw points at quarterback, unless you're talking about no touchdowns passing in the entire game, less than 200 yards passing per team, that is not going to be viable. I mean, if a guy goes out there, gets you 250 passing yards, that's 14 fantasy points right there. That could be enough on a showdown slate to be optimal. So I would not recommend doing that, Reeve, unless you have one of those special circumstances like we had with the Patriots Bills, where we have 50-mile-an-hour winds. That's really going to be the only time I'd be willing to do something like that. But yeah, I wouldn't do it. So again, good luck, guys. I'll see you guys tonight. If you have any further questions, go ahead and put them down in the chat. But I'll see you guys next time.